Hello and welcome to another MBUK podcast. I'm Rob Weaver, and as ever, I'm joined by Tom Marvin. How you doing, Tom?
I'm all right, thanks, Rob. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Now, today we are joined by a former MBUK staff writer who is now the lead commentator for all things mountain bike related on the Warner Brothers Discovery channels. None other than Ric McLaughlin. How are you doing, Ric?
I'm great, thank you, Rob. Hello, Tom. How are you?
All good, thanks. Yeah, good to have you here, Ric.
Look, let's kick off things right away because you've been currently working on a new series which aired, I think it started last Monday, I believe.
Started last Monday, and when we're recording this, it's the second Monday off it being out. So yeah, race bikes is now a thing. It's been a thing on my laptop and in my wee world for a long time, but we're finally out there. First 4 episodes are going live in this mid-season break amidst the Whoop UCI Mountain Bike World Series racing, and then the second 4 are due to come out at the end of the year, sort of maybe November time, if we can get them all shot and cut and put together.
So tell us a little bit about race bikes to the uninitiated, if they haven't seen it yet.
So race bikes, there's no way of I've tried to explain this, and I've had to explain this to a lot of people who aren't mountain bikers, obviously, at WBD, and need justification as to why you're wanting to do what you're wanting to do. But one of my whole big things that I've always found is that people just love bikes. With TV, we do a lot of building heroes and talking about the athletes and the incredible things that they can do. But I think one thing that really unites all mountain bikers is a love of bikes. And it's kind of, let's face it, for some of us, 50 to 60% of the hobby, isn't it? Is just standing, talking about a bike and looking at bikes and getting caught up in the little details and tracking down those little parts. And for me, a natural extension of that has always been, there's never been anything more interesting to me personally than racing bikes that have raced, bikes that have been set up by some of the biggest names ever and done incredible things. And I just decided I wanted to make a TV program about those bikes, not necessarily about the people, which sounds actually quite psychotic when you say it like that, but I think it's just it's a bit like Superbike used to be in MBUK. Yeah. It's just, let's get a race bike in, let's get a special bike in, light it really nice, spend the time and the effort it deserves on making it look really good, and then talk about it and its story, like this inanimate machine that we all love.
Nice.
How long has it been in the making? What was it must have been a pretty cool thing to sort of kick off.
Yeah, so my boss asked me for an idea for a documentary series in the middle of last year, and obviously I was flat out at the time doing commentary and doing a million other things, and he said, you've no big rush, you've got 2 to 3 months to come up with a pitch, with a deck, which I'd never done a PowerPoint before. I got to 39 years of age without ever having been asked to do a PowerPoint, so I thought I was doing well. And then at the start of Ludenviel Race Week last year, he said, oh, you know what, I told you you've got 2 or 3 months. And I was like, yeah. Have you started yet? And I went, no. And he said, well, you've got 4 days. So I kind of just grabbed loads of Google images of race bikes that I loved and examples of why I thought they were interesting, and sort of threw them all onto like a big vomity PowerPoint of pictures and bullet points, and then presented it to him. And he went for it and just sort of saw that, yeah, this guy's obviously an anorak about this sort of stuff, and maybe other people are anoraks about it, and we should make this. So it started then. Then it went into the bit that I actually probably was the most comfortable with, which was actually writing it. And it was a lot of MBUK in that as well. There was a lot of writing for both people who are absolute devoted nerds like we are, as well as people who maybe haven't ridden the bike in 14, 15 years and want to get back into it and sort of are picking back up. And then once the new year came, it was down to actually filming them and actually working out what it was going to look like.
So obviously one episode's out already. Can you give us just a bit of insight as to what bikes kind of made the final cut and how you actually came about in deciding? Because I'm guessing that list was pretty big. How did you whittle it down?
Yeah, I think if the three of us were sat in a pub with a pint of something in front of us at the minute, you could probably draw up a list of 30 or 40 bikes within 10 minutes that would deserve to be in there. I can tell you the first four because the second four haven't been shot yet, so I don't want to go too far down that alleyway. First four are Steve Pete's V10 from Canberra, Worlds. Tonight is Sean Palmer's Worlds Intense M1. The next one is basically all of Nino Schurter's Scott Sparks. He's got them all. So we went and saw all those. And then, there's a lot. And then the final one is the Honda RN1, which, if I'm being honest, I think the Honda was probably... I really wanted to make a documentary about that bike alone, and I needed a bit of a vehicle to do it. And then as I started sort of putting this all out on paper, I realised that actually there was probably a bigger series of stuff to do.
Was seeing some of those bikes, were they as cool as you thought they were going to be?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that comes across really well in what we've made, in that like Palmer's Intense M1 from Cairns, like the Troy Lee paint job on it, and it's all sort of paint's crackling off it now, and the tires are they're basically carbon, but whenever that thing sat in front of you, and I say this that like you could put that bike in front of anyone who doesn't know anything about mountain bikes, and I think they would understand that this is a really special object. This object means something to someone somewhere. The Honda was probably the most emotional one because I'd never seen one. I'd no idea. And actually, it turned out strangely that I had seen one. The very first big bike race I ever went to was the Worlds in Fort William in 2007. And so whilst having the eyeballs water blasted out of my head, I did see that bike on track. But since then, it's always kind of been I don't want to be all cheesy and say a grail bike, but that's always been, if I could have one bike sat in my house just to look at, it would be an RN1. And that did sort of, I don't know, there was a lot of involuntary noises made whenever I saw that.
I guess the thing with the RN1 is it was never a production bike, so it was a bike that, you couldn't even get a replica of it, and there were so few of them that it has to be special. Whereas, Nino's bikes, I had the pleasure of watching the Nino episode last night, actually, and it's pretty cool, like all the bikes. And obviously there's the custom paint jobs and the special bits of kit and stuff, but they are, in effect, a bike that you could pop to the shops and go and buy, whereas the RN1, like, that is it.
Yeah, that's it, and right? There's none. Well, this is the thing. So apparently, you know that bit at the end of Indiana Jones, they've got all the crates, and the guy, it zooms out and the guy's just walking with a big crate through the warehouse. Apparently, there might be one in a box in Honda Land somewhere in their big sort of like depot where they have one of everything they've made. The one that Greg Minar, he basically has to sign a contract each year to say that it's in his custodianship, it's being looked after, it's still technically, it's not even Hondas, it's HRCs, and that it's being looked after by him. But a few people told me along the way that Martin Whiteley still has one, but I interviewed Martin for another episode we were working on, and he said that no, he doesn't have one. So I went through the entire inventory with Google Translate of everything that's in Honda's warehouse, and I can't see another one listed there. So we had to work on the assumption that is the last one. Two got stolen without the transmissions in them. Do you remember that? The internal drive units weren't in them.
In 2006? Something like that?
People were cagey about what happened with them. Yeah, I think that was 6 they got nicked. And I think they ended up on eBay. And was it Hungary or Bulgaria? I think they ended up on eBay.
I'd heard various rumours that people had gone into, like, I don't know, some shop somewhere in Eastern Europe and they'd seen it in the back. You know, you hear all these sorts of stories and you're just like...
I like the way you've gone with some shop, not even bike shop. Like, they're just in a shop. Like a hairdresser's somewhere. No, but it was... You say that it was never production, but I think that was one of the really cool things about seeing it for the first time for me was it looked really close to production. Like, it's a finished thing, and there's a lot more Honda on that bike than I knew about. Like, the hubs are Honda, the fork crown's Honda, the stem's Honda. There's a lot of stuff that they made for it. And Greg told us that, to his knowledge, the idea was that you would be able to buy that with the Showa suspension as a frame kit in Honda dealers. And then basically, as with a lot of corporate stuff, one boss changed and went, no, we're not doing it. And it stopped. So I kind of thought that, I think when you're around, like Rob, you definitely attest to this, when you're around racing a lot of race bikes are kind of held together and sort of a bit wobbly and a bit shonky and sort of not quite the finished article. But the Honda really was. It looked, I mean, the wheels looked small on it. It was a bit small, but from 30, 40 foot away, that looked like a modern bike.
You've been around racing a lot, for a long time. But did you find yourself learning little bits and pieces about any of these bikes along the way? Like, even if it didn't make it into the program?
Loads, yeah, absolutely, loads. I need to talk about other bikes other than the Honda, but that's just like, it's such a thing for me. But like, there's a bit in the episode where all the graphics on the Honda had about 20 layers of like laminate tear off. So basically, in between runs, they'd get washed, dried, and then the mechanics could repolish the whole frame and then just pull the tear-offs off the decals so they all stayed in exactly the right place for all the marketing and for all the photos. And I didn't know that. And halfway through filming, Greg was like, hey, look at this, and started like peeling one of the stickers off it. And I was like, I had a bit of a wobble and was like, what are you doing? Like, are you having some kind of brain episode? And he just pulled it off. And I was like, it's so Honda. Like, it's so that bike. I think, yeah, a lot of little touches and stuff. Like, I think the other three for the first drop in the series were relatively more straightforward to research because there was just more stuff about them. It's more, there's more stuff online. There was more stuff in books and all the old magazines that I've kept for years. So they were a bit more straightforward. But the Honda was kind of a treasure trove of little details that I didn't really know about. Which, I mean, it's crazy now you think about the money they spent on that program and you consider it in a modern light. You would never spend that sort of money without putting somebody with a film camera on it, like the whole time. Like creating videos, creating content. Right? Yeah, they just came in, did it, and then went again. And a point I hadn't thought about before we sort of got towards the end of an interview with Greg was he said that his biggest regret about it was where would they have gone next? Because by that stage, 2007, obviously Sam Hill on the Sunday was in the ascendancy, was like at the peak of his game. They would have had to have come up with something that would have been able to compete. And it's that I kind of left it going, yeah, like what would they have done? So that was cool.
It's very cool. I mean, if we were to go back, obviously you and I worked together for a long time. The fact now you have your own TV
not
series.
Long enough, Rob. Not long enough.
You're welcome back.
Yeah, come back. I just think it's so cool you've been able to put something like this together that if we would have talked about this sort of 10 years ago, it would have just been just a pipe dream,
I guess in many respects, like I said, like they're kind of like super bikes, right? And the mag has had that. It's just the in-depthness of what you've managed to do with with race bikes is cool, and to go and actually see them in person on location as well. I know, you couldn't get them all in one place, so to go to Nino's workshop, or to go and see Greg, or to go and see Petey up in Sheffield.
And to go to Temecula to see the Intense. I mean, that's a really cool episode. As a massive fan of the Intense M1, I was.
Do you know what? I left Intense, and I had a 2001 M1, which I sold criminally to put lots and lots of lager inside myself at university, and I left Intense going, I wish I still had that bike. And the new Spider hadn't been released then, but there was one sitting, and Jeff kindly sort of showed us it and told us about all the points and stuff on it, and I was like, I'd buy one of these now. I get this brand. Whenever you go to a brand and you see what makes it, and I think that's been. I mean, it's probably I can let you into one of them from the next load. We went to see Commentating, and that was very, very similar. Whenever I went to that brand new big HQ of theirs and got shown around by Max himself, I left there going, I really want a Commentating now. I get this. I get the passion and the energy of this. Do you know what I mean? And I think Intense, if you're our vintage Rob, Intense is one of those ones. They're a bit like an Alfa Romeo, really. I think if you're into cars, you've got to have one Alfa at some stage, haven't you? Even if you know it mightn't be what you hope it's going to be. I think you've got to have an Intense at some stage as well. They're one of those brands.
Definitely. So how does the whole race bike series fit in with everything else you're doing?
So it's my day job in terms of, depending on how close I am to a race. Once I get closer to a race, within about 2 weeks of a race or so, then I kind of swap over into editorial lead role, which is basically working with a team to establish what we're going to cover at each race, what we need to talk about, who we need to talk to, the stories we need to try and tell. And then as it gets closer again, then I head into commentary mode, and that's notes and sort of... commentary is kind of like... It's a bit like having an exam that doesn't end. You just feel like you constantly make notes and revise and make notes and revise and make notes and revise, and then you end up in the booth and it starts, and it's sort of like you have to rely on the fact that you've kind of finessed that process.
Which bit of the process do you like the most? Do you like the commentary stuff? Do you like sort of making the content pre-race? Is it race bikes? What sort of stuff do you really get kicks off?
I've really, really enjoyed race bikes a lot more than maybe I even sort of thought that I would, because I was messaging the camera operator on it, and just the guy who's made it look so good, Chris Tyndall, last night about it, and I think I sort of underestimated how much I'd be into it, because commentary, there's always going to be commentary on sport. You've sort of stepped into an existing role. This kind of feels like I've come up with something and made it with an incredibly talented team, and now it's out there and people seem to like it, and I think that's maybe I've been so caught up in making it that I didn't understand the sense of satisfaction I get. That I got to watch 2 weekends ago. I got to watch the first episode finished with my mum and my dad and my kids and my partner, and that was like a really huge... I didn't think I'd be sort of as into and as emotional about it as I was, so that was really cool. But I mean, I like it all. I like, again, a very MBUK sort of challenge with what we do with TV is we really want to grow this sport. And I mean, we just mentioned Sam Hill. The three of us know who Sam Hill is and what he meant, and his impact on the sport. But if you just started watching 2 years ago, you don't know who Sam Hill is. So it's just having that geek's eye on, right, we need to explain, we need to just talk about this and actually bring people in and sort of open the treasure chest a wee bit and show them what they could buy into here.
That sounds like next year's series.
Yeah, no, that's the problem though, because I've got this, I already have a list of stuff I want to do next year, and in terms of race bikes, and I'm sort of like, right, we need to just actually get all of this year's done, and then think about that. But no, it's all good. I think commentary is probably the most stressful, because I think as a journalist you're taught to like prepare, to make notes, to get ready for following a story and what the story is going to be. But especially with downhill, you sit down and you have no idea what the story is going to be. And it's a very difficult form of commentary in that, I mean, if you look at the elite men's field, anyone in that top 15, realistically, top 20 maybe, could win it now. And you've got to be able to quickly work out, place your bets on who you think that's going to be, judging by what they're doing, and give it the right energy to make sure that lands. And that's quite a stressful thing. But I've said before as well, it's kind of like skydiving, or what I imagine skydiving must be like, where if they open the door of the airplane and it's time to jump out of it, you've got to jump out of the airplane and then see what happens.
Are you going into the commentary booth with like a massive like pages and pages and pages of data, or is it sort of pretty much up here? Or
so we've got Martin Whiteley actually is our stats guy. He prepares a stats package for us, a bit like you would get in wider sport, MotoGP or football, or it's a company called Okta who do it, who give you the idea is that you should be able to sit down for an hour with this like 20-page doc and be able, with a highlighter pen, and sort of be able to pull together a commentary from it. He does that for us. I have, for each format, a massive spreadsheet of notes for each rider, which I update at the end of, or at the start of each week after a race. But the big thing I've always kind of struggled with since school is that unless I write something down, I don't really feel like it goes in my head. I don't know if if that's some sort of pointer to some kind of really, really deep psychological malady that I should take more seriously. But like, I kind of have now a system where I have a notebook, a big A4 notebook that I'll be filling throughout the week. And then for top 10 in downhill, I'll have it ruled out, and I'll have like name, position in the last race, Q1, Q2, and then 5 or 6 points or a bit of info about them that I've probably found out across the week that I can quickly sort of look at. It'll just be on my knee in front of me, and then hopefully somehow it goes all right.
how do you find the mix of doing downhill and cross country? Do you find one easier than the other? Is the one that you get more excited about? Obviously, we sort of talk about downhill a lot, but cross country is massive and super important, and it's great to watch too.
Cross country I find is a more straightforward commentary because it kind of opens up in front of your eyes. Like, it's quite obvious as to what's happening. If somebody's breaking across or like is going from one group to another, we can see on our timing screens in the booth. We've got our producer Pete Burton's in my ear letting me know. Like, I don't get as stressed as I do before a downhill. A lot of that is because, as I say, downhill's really, like, it's a really, really intense commentary. For a lot of the riders, they're maybe on the screen for a minute and a half, and then once we head further down the field, we start to get full runs. That's a lot. But also, I have 2 people in with me in downhill, and a lot of my job is to anchor that and to help bring them in and out with their points and what they want to talk about and communicate as well. So it's like, it's a big, it's really, really odd. Like this thing, like my whoop band, like on a downhill day is like massive, like amount expenditure of energy, when all I've really done is walk from my hotel room to a booth, sit down and walk back to the hotel room again. So but then I do think a lot of that comes from, like, I'm a fan of cross country, but like I've been a fan of downhill for a lot longer, and I think that's true of a lot of people from our part of the world, really. I think downhill runs a bit deeper, and it, as a sport, I just think it's incredible. I think people riding push bikes down the side of mountains and getting to a finish line within the same 1/10 of a second as each other is just, it's mesmerising. And I think that kind of hook just sort of adds to the stress of a race day.
What's the experience been like since taking over as lead commentator? Obviously, you'd been working for Red Bull, but maybe a little bit more behind the scenes, and then slowly things have evolved, and now you're kind of running the show. It must be quite a lot to deal with.
Yeah, I don't know about running show. I think you're definitely in a very visible seat. With Red Bull, I was working again on editorial stuff, helping with scripts and sort of direction of things, and editing the Red Bull bike website as my day job, and then doing field reporting, so questions at the bottom of races at the finish line. And with commentary, it's been a baptism of fire.
Have you done some training? Did Warner Brothers sort of? So I know Rob Warner famously talked about having training and stuff at the BBC and stuff like that, but was that not the case then?
I had a phone call with a guy who commentated on tennis once. That was good.
Cool.
Actually, I say that. Not really, no. I say that. I have had a load of help from Rob Hatch, who's obviously voice of road cycling for WBD and Eurosport audiences, and he was really, really helpful, and is really, really helpful. We'll send each other wee voice notes now and again. He was helpful in the sense that he gave me a lot of practical sort of help. So things like the spreadsheets for notes, I had no idea about that. That had never occurred to me that was a thing. But he got a lot of stick and a lot of really horrible stuff online for a long time, and deleted a Twitter account with like 50,000 followers on it or something, and like he's a bit of an emotional support animal for that as well. But it's been real.
Yeah, I guess there has been quite a lot of support for Warner, and how he moved on from it, and after Warner Brothers took over, Red Bull sort of stepped away, and then obviously you've kind of taken over as lead commentator. I know we've sort of chatted, you've had quite a lot of stick in the comments and stuff. That must have been really hard to deal with. Obviously you're out there trying your best but getting a load of stick.
So I'm 3 years in now, and I'm not saying it doesn't impact me, because I don't think you're human if negative comments and like stuff like that doesn't affect you. But what I would say is that I think you can certainly take steps to limit those. I don't read DMs. Like I got some horrible DMs of like just people coming up with really, really like brutal stuff, and then I just sort of had a dawning in the back of a taxi one day. I was like, why am I reading this? I think what helped me was I did a lot of work freelance for a long time after I left MBUK, and I got used to the idea of ultimately the only person that really needs to be happy with the job that you're doing, there's two people, it's yourself and your boss. Like speaking with a freelance head on.
Yeah.
If your boss isn't happy with what you're doing, they'll tell you how to change it and how to do it differently to justify them paying you. So I think I had a handle on that already, and my boss was really supportive, really, really helpful, and I've always been really up and really sort of like give me more feedback, tell me how to do this better, and then acting on it. And I get it, fans are fans. Whenever I was at Red Bull, we used to get pelters that Freecaster was better and that we were killing the sport. So I guess that will always be there. But at the same time, if I was walking down Princess Street in Edinburgh and somebody told me that they didn't like my trainers, I probably, not knowing them, wouldn't take their opinion on board either. So why would I take somebody's opinion that I've not met and it can't affect what I'm doing online to heart? But I think it's also, I think as you get a bit older, you get a bit better at sort of handling your emotional state. And like, if I'm really, really tired and down the dumps already, wandering into the comment section probably isn't going to help me. So just sort of like, right. I think it was where it really hit me a bit was I would have assumed that I was part of that core audience online and a bit of a, really, really involved in it. And now I feel like I'm less involved in it, but equally I'm fine with that. I'm all right. I think everyone's been through big stuff in life. I don't think the internet comments really affect me unless you let them. I think you've got to choose not to. And I got asked to do this job on a bike ride 3.5 years ago now, and 3 years ago, and I quickly went, well, imagine saying no to that. You'd spend the rest of your career wondering if you could have done it. So I still stand by that. I still love doing it. That far outweighs any one person's criticism.
It feels like you guys have got a really good dynamic now in the booth. It feels like it's in a really, really good place. The races are exciting to watch. You got some brilliant insights. Is that a really natural sort of occurrence, or are you having to kind of make sure? I suppose you're the glue holding it together to some extent, but I get the feeling that you guys just get on really, really well anyway, outside of it.
I think it doesn't matter what sport you're watching. If you're watching something that feels like three people who are fans of what they're watching talking about it, I think that always shines through. I think that's always really, really positive. And certainly, like, even with things like UCI World Championships, where it's a different production. It's a bit of a long sort of explanation as to why. But I've done those traditionally with riders, for example, like Charlie Murray or a Reece Wilson. And even if you don't have that same amount of time working together synergy-wise, they're such fans of it and they're so knowledgeable that carries it along. I think Josh Carlson could commentate on two peas rolling across a plate and probably make it entertaining and full of energy. And I think a really good foil for him is Nico, in that Nico's got this really quiet, calm way about him. But some of the stuff he can spot that Carlson and I will not have seen as a bike rider is unbelievable. He'll just pull something out of the air, and Flo or Anthony, our director, will then put the replay up, and there you see it. Like, it's obvious. And then Ollie Beck and I kind of I don't know if we knew each other. I think we probably would have met a couple of times when I was down in Bath at MBUK. But we have a very, very similar, very, very sort of dark sense of humor, and very sort of we get on really well, and we would naturally go for a beer together in the evening, or go for a run, and I think that makes commentary with him really, really easy, because it's just like watching racing with your mate.
There's been sort of quite a lot of changes going on with racing over the past couple of years, and obviously there's been a bit of backlash against some of that, but the format changes that sort of seem to be in place this year seem to be broadly popular, both with those who are watching it, but also those who are racing it as well. Is that, how do you sort of see it panning out going forward? Are you happy with that? Do you think things need to change again, or are we in a solid place for the next few seasons?
I think Q2, the introduction of the Q2 system, has been a real positive. I know that Rory Cunningham and that the sports team worked really hard on making that a feasible thing and working out where things would fall and how it would work schedule wise. From an editorial and from a commentary point of view, I think that's a fantastic move, because over and over again, the simpler you can make something, the quicker people can explain it and watch it. And that's what, as the producer on enduro whenever it was Enduro World Series. That's what we used to struggle with that, because if you've raced an enduro or you're a fan of enduro, it's really straightforward. But if you're sitting, as I said, like my parents, like a couple of weekends ago, if I sat them down to watch it and tried to explain it to them, it's a very complicated story to tell. I think what Q2 has done in getting rid of the protected riders rule is that it's made our job from an editorial broadcast side much more straightforward. And I think that racers are responding to it well because it's fair. There's nowhere to hide. You can do it or you can't. And I think that protection was quite a complicated thing that came about a bit because of broadcast and how we could make sure that everybody gets to see the rider they like every week. But ultimately, I mean, look at Munoz at the last one. Like, yeah, 100% right. He should be last man, top of the hill, because he went fastest. And I think that's been a real positive. I don't particularly think things need to change to a great extent. I'd love to see more. We are trying pushing teams like further forward and building a bit more of the stories that you see on platforms like Netflix, where they tell so much story around the teams and access to the teams. But I mean, you know, it's exciting that we get to do that, and hopefully we get to push that forward a wee bit more.
What's your take on the tracks at the minute then, in particular in downhill? I mean, I think XC's in a really solid place in terms of how technical everything's got. We actually had Charlie Aldridge in this morning, says hi.
He's massive, isn't he?
He's a big lad. Yeah, very, very big. Especially for someone
big
my
dude.
height. Yeah. But in terms of downhill, you sometimes, I think you kind of hear some of the riders talking about how things have straightened up over the years and the racing's got tighter. But then you have tracks like Le Tuile, which steepest track they've had in maybe forever.
Steepest track ever, yeah.
Yeah, loads and loads of turns. But the racing was still really tight. Do you think we're going to just continue to see a sort of a mix like that? Where do you see it going?
My take on it is that I think people maybe they maybe oversimplify how they're looking at it in terms of, if you look at, for example, the F1 calendar, that is a massive mixture of tracks. And it's a massive, you know, it will be a massive mixture of conditions over a year. It's a world championship. That's how it should work. I think that, like, as you say, the times are so tight, which is kind of the proof of the pudding, really. I think that you will always have a group of riders who want a style of track. You'll have another set who want another style of track. But what's always fascinated me with downhill are riders like the Rachel Athertons, Loic Bruni, Troy Brosnan, that it doesn't matter what the track's doing or what the weather's doing, or they have that ability to turn up and go. So I think actually, I mean, we had a lot of comments at the start of the year about tracks going, you know, as you say, too straight, too fast, whatever. But then we all knew the Tuile was coming. And then the Tuile arrives, suddenly steepest track of all time, I think 88 corners or something, up on an average of 57 or something like that. And like, it's just like, for me as a race fan, walking down, I walk the tracks a lot whenever I'm there. I find cross country, actually, just to return to your last question, cross country, like the Olympics we did from London without having been around the track, and you can do it. It's difficult, but you can do it. Whereas downhill, I need to see tracks a lot, because I think you need to be able to talk like a bike rider and sort of see the things that we would see if we rode them or walked down them. And like walking down the Tuile, I was like, this is insane. This is like a serious level. But then I get that same feeling when you're stood on the side of Leogang and they're pushing over 70 kilometers an hour, or through that compression in Pal Aran Sal, whenever again they're up around 70. And I think it's a sport where tracks are always going to be debated. I don't think we'll ever have a season where everybody goes, yeah, tracks are all mint, because it's such a defining factor of it.
I guess it's so subjective as well, like you said.
It's so subjective. And I know there was years ago there were plans to do an urban round, and it was either Barcelona or Madrid, I think it was, and the teams pushed back and said, no, it's too much, we would have whatever, it's too complicated to do logistically for us. And then your argument is an urban downhill track, has that got a part of a World Cup circuit? But then you go, imagine the amount of people that would have put the sport in front of. And a bit like the Monaco Grand Prix, that's not a good racetrack, ostensibly. But it is this showcase thing that everyone gets to see every year. I think the tracks are good. I mean, we're heading into second half of the season. I've not seen what they're building for the Lake Placid track yet. I've not seen anything, but it's a new track, which as a fan I love going to as well, because it's a blank slate. It's about who can turn up on the day and do it. We've got Saint Anne coming up, we've got Léger coming up, both classics. I think it's good to have a mixture of those big classic tracks and the sort of the new school debutants. And yeah, I think you're always going to have comments about tracks.
How much influence do you guys as broadcasters have on the building of tracks? Obviously, the local area is effectively asked to put on the race, or they offer the race up. But how much do you get to influence what goes on there?
That's kind of outside of my field of expertise, but I know that once we're on the ground, our director and different members of the broadcast team will have a lot of input as to where the cameras are, for example, where we can get banners in, where advertising boarding can be, to make sure that it doesn't restrict camera shots. I know I did a bit of cyclocross commentary 2 Christmases ago, and that was one of the things I find really hard about that, because they're all behind screening. And so if you get a side-on shot, you just see a head and shoulders above it. So we try and avoid a lot of that. But we would never say, like, put a massive jump over there, it'll look great. It is, like, the track is developed. I know Rory travels, like, I travel a lot. Rory Cunningham travels an insane amount. And a lot of that is making sure that whenever the rest of the circus turns up, they have a track that will work for everyone, but most of all for riders. So yeah, I think that's another thing that I think gets a bit misconstrued, that TV have the ability to build a load of berms overnight and go get round them in practice. Like we can't do that.
We did mention it briefly while we were off air, but how much stick have you had personally just about like the whole paywall thing? I'm guessing people come to you for answers, but as you pointed out when we were talking about it earlier, it's nothing personally to do with you, is it?
No, as I said to you earlier, I've kind of developed this thing of, it's like asking your bin man about your council tax. It's not something I'm involved in. It's not something I have a dog in the fight over, really. I get personal stick for everything, so it kind of gets added onto that pile. But yeah, it's definitely a topic, but it's not really for me to comment on, because I don't have anything to do with it. It's not something that's across my desk.
I guess
it's a bit like asking you, do you have anything to do with the cover price of the magazine?
No.
Me neither. I guess that's the thing, you are in effect, you're the face of WBD. You are the face of downhill racing, and as consumers, if they want to direct their comments, whether positive or negative, the obvious place for that to go is to you. Yeah. But I mean, again, as I said, in terms of coping strategies and stuff, if you fire me off a load of really, really angry threats and disillusionments to my DMs on Instagram, I'm unlikely to read them. So it's like, it's one of those ones that,
it's something that's so much above what I do. But you're right in that I think that there is that thing of, if you are a voice or a face of anything in the media, I'm sure you guys will both know from videos that you've made and, you know, decisions you've made editorially, that people will come at you for stuff, but it's not worth not doing the job over.
Rick, I got called disgusting once. Someone actually referred to me as disgusting. His face is disgusting, the comment said.
I've literally never seen you do anything disgusting. And I've seen you do some things.
I was quite surprised. I was like, is that warranted? Maybe. I don't. I got
a DM last time I sort of hedged the door open on my DMs. I got, the first one was, "You make this sport so boring, I hope you die." And the second one was, "I get that Josh is Australian and Rick is Irish, but their accents are awful." And I'm like, I can't change that. Like, at least I can make it more exciting and not have to die like the first guy said. But the accent thing, I can't do anything about. So, and then you go, I don't know, there's a bit of you that goes, all right, cool. But I mean, I get it. I watch sport. I watch football. I rate. I throw stuff around like a child. Sport is entertainment. Anybody who tells you anything differently is wrong. Sport is entertainment. We tune in every week to be entertained, and part of being entertained is that you're involved and you're caught up in it. And I mean, I think we're really, really fortunate in the quality of the racing at the minute is just like through the roof. Like, I know, again, like you said it earlier, we're talking a lot about downhill, but we are talking about downhill. But like Loic Bruni's run in Pal Aran Sal, and then the big stare over to the hot seat afterwards, you're just like, that's why we watch this. And I get that people enjoy it. So
it's theatre almost, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it's like, and that's the thing, as a fan, you're in there. And with your sort of work hat on, I was like, if Jackson gets 5 in a row, gets the Jackson 5, and then we head into this mid-season break, then it's going to be a lot to build up the intrigue for the second half of the year. But then Loic went and did that, and you go, oh no, like, it's on. And it was just, I mean, you can't deny, like, that's downhill at its best.
So, from your point of view, if you were to look at a whole race weekend, what sort of 3 or 4 key ingredients would you say are needed to make a really memorable race?
I think, first and foremost, you need a track. I don't know. You need something special. You need, like, La Tuile was special just because there'd been so much buzz about the track all week, and it felt like La Tuile felt straightforward from the start of the week, in that it was so obviously so brutal that whoever won there, regardless of what anyone else did, it would be special. But then in La Tuile, we got those weird weather breaks, and we got there was a break whenever basically everything went down on the side of the track, and we had to fill, and there was a bit of the sort of the unpredictability of downhill going on. But I've always, I don't know, I think whenever you look back on the most memorable things in downhill, it's always the rivalries. It's always like, because it's such an individual sport, but at that level it's not. Like, I think Bruni said in his interview after Pal Aran Sal that he had in his head the time he thought might win it. He had a time that he thought Loris or Amory would do, and then he had a combination of those, like a gap between those that he knew he needed to beat. And you're just going like, he's seeing time on, again, the side of a mountain. Like, I don't know. I think you're right, you need that theatre. You need that, like, I think with downhill, it's always cool when the last rider at the top wins as well. I think that's always kind of like the big crescendo, the big sort of like, look what they've just done. But then you look at I think Nina Hoffman's been a star this season. You look at her running Pal Aran Sal when she stopped halfway down for a selfie with a marshal and stuff like that, and you go, that's cool as well. It's a very different thing, but it's still very downhill. I don't know, what do you think it needs?
I think you're right. I think the rivalry, I think whether that's downhill or cross country, I think there's a lot of if you're into it and you kind of have some kind of understanding, I think it counts for a lot. I think the tracks matter, but as long as the racers are happy and feel like they can race hard, they maybe don't matter as much as everyone thinks, to a degree. I think if they're into it and having fun.
I'd go with that. I've seen really, really weather affected races in the past, and then somebody goes berserk, and it's an unbelievable piece of bike riding, but I don't know if that's remembered as a great race necessarily. I think
it's hard though, right? Because I think sometimes of those things that when some of the Nina Schurter moments or Rachel Atherton moments or Sam Hill moments that really stand out help to kind of build the sport as a whole. But I don't think you necessarily need that you don't need each weekend to have one of those things.
But is it a funny sport? I always think it's a funny sport in that if you look back at the Sam Hill era or the Aaron Gwynn era or the Rachel Atherton era, whenever they're winning them by a country mile, or certainly a lot of time, whenever they're at their best, everyone's a bit like, oh, Sam's going to win again, or Rachel's won again. Or then they stop winning for, let's give it a year, and then they come back or they start again, and everybody's like, oh, it's great to see them back. Great to see them back at their best. And then it changes straight away into like, oh, it's fantastic that they're back. And you go, really? Because at the time you weren't enjoying this.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. And I think, that's what I think. The Hill era was a bit different because he would go all out, win everything by a huge margin. Then he'd be injured. So you wouldn't necessarily get just that dominance that say like Gwynn had, that Rachel had, that maybe we've seen Jackson have to a degree. So it was more sort of like, I think
what's happening now with Jackson is going to be fascinating, because I'm so interested to see what mental reserves he has to deal with that defeat in Pal Aran Sal, and what Jackson comes back into the last few races of the year. Because where I think downhill is so interesting, I mean, it's interesting on so many levels for me, but I've talked about this a lot with people, in that Danny Hart in 2016 was winning them. Like if he was on a bike, he was the fastest person there. Like it didn't matter what the weather was doing, what the track was like, what the session was, Danny would go out and win. But is that the same as a Greg Minnaar, a G. Atherton, an Aaron Gwynn, who are mentally putting everything together and working out sections here, sections there, building that whole puzzle of the perfect run, and then just executing it? I don't necessarily think it is. I think there's a level of confidence in downhill that will make you do incredible things, but once that stops, the question marks kind of hang in the air a bit. And I think like Bruni said it in, where was it, in La Tuile, I think, in his post-race interview, he said like, I need a rival to get the best out of myself, and bad news, Jackson, this year it's you. Yeah, and I'm really interested. I'm really interested to find out as a young man how because he is a young man. He's an unbelievable bike rider, but he's young, and it might inspire him to be even more incredible. But I've always had this sort of real fascination with riders who race a season and not just one round.
Well, just remember back to the late great Stevie Smith and G. Atherton duking it out. Was it 2013? Something like that.
2013, because that was my first. So whenever I left MBUK, I started writing for Red Bull Bike, and they started sending me out to races to do race reports, and that was my first one, was Leogang in 13 when he did the bike flip, when Stevie Smith did the bike flip when he crossed the line. Yeah, and like that's still just such a moment. And again, that was a rivalry that went all year, and no one knew what was going to happen with it. I'd love it if this one goes down to St. Anne this year.
Yeah, it'd be incredible, wouldn't it?
Do you have favourite riders on the circuit at the moment? Who do you love watching, I guess maybe personally, and but more from a race point of view?
I think you probably should say Charlie Aldridge at this point, because he did mention that.
Charlie Aldridge,
yeah, I thought so.
Mainly because he's so massive. Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of anyone who can get on a bike and race at a UCI World Cup. I'm automatically a fan of. Who's impressed me this year, standout wise? There's been so many. I'm really impressed with Jordan Williams this year, actually.
Yeah.
I think he's been in the wars, but to come back and just be consistent. He's one, like, what was really interesting for us was, and I was sort of ringing the bell about it from quite a long way out, editorially, about Q2 is going to find a lot of people out, and you weren't sure how it was going to go for Jordan, but he's been superb this year. I think Nina Hoffman has really impressed me, as I say, as well. I love watching Reece Wilson ride a push bike. I've sort of like we would ride the odd time together, uplifts and stuff during the winter, and having a bit of background into what's going on with setting up that Aon Racing Tournai camper vans team, that bike I think is really interesting. I got to ride it at the start of the year, and that was really, really interesting. There's so many names. I think I'm always slightly in awe of Vergier as well. Whenever you're stood at the side of a track and Loris comes through, to have, he's got real composure, just a real magic touch on a bike where he kind of floats through stuff that looks like you're watching the world's best struggle with, and he's just. And I'll tell you who else impresses me, Aaron Gwynn, who, like we just talked about, Sam Hill. I don't think Aaron Gwynn gets the credit in the grand scheme he deserves in this sport, because I'm not convinced you would see someone ride like Amaury Pierron without Aaron Gwynn. He just had that physical strength and just sheer determination and vision of what he was doing. So having Aaron back at the races and having done a bit of commentary with him and got to know him a bit, and then getting to see him on a race bike has kind of opened my eyes a bit to what he's capable of. He was in the Tweel in the middle of practice, like just disappearing down a track that had a lot of guys, not half his age, but a lot younger than him, stood shaking their heads, not knowing what was going on. I'm now just naming mountain bikers too. Till Allren. Max and Till, but Till Allren I think could be the absolute real deal. Like that run in La Tweel was one of the runs of the weekend for me, and it was very Vergier-esque. There was maybe slightly more aggression than Loris would have gone with, but just dancing a very fine tightrope the whole way down.
A lot of
and
races,
that's I don't know if they told us. Sorry, Tom. They told us this when we were there last week. I didn't realise that bike that Till and Max are running is bone stock.
Huh.
Bar, I think they said the only difference between their bike and the one you can buy in the showroom at Common Sal is it has an O-chain on the chainring, which I thought was a really. I mean, if you want to see how good a measure of a downhill bike, that's pretty impressive.
The guys and girls who are racing, obviously they're incredibly fast on a bike, but I guess these days there's a whole professionalism around being a rider. There's interviews, there's the brand ambassadorship. Are there any riders in particular who stand out as being actual true professionals? Who's like easy to work with? Who do you want to head down to the pits and have a chat with?
Well, I'm kind of in an odd position in that it's not odd to say you're old, but I've been doing it a long time, so there's a lot of people that you just naturally recognise from your workplace. But I think what Specialised Gravity do, they're very forward facing with that stuff. Like, you have a time, you ask for time with them at the start of the week, you get your time, they're there early in the right kit, and are very on message, on brand. The stuff they've done with Brembo this year, I think we as a sport need more stuff like that. We need to but we need to realise that just marketing our sport to companies in our sport is not a sustainable long-term thing, and actually going out and bringing in big brands from outside. I think they've done that really well, and they're always super engaging, super easy to work with. Commensal, Muck Off by Riding Addiction, same thing. Their approach is it's more akin to MotoGP than a lot of other teams might be. It's very sort of very high tech, every last little detail is sweated. They're really impressive. I love what Orbea FMD are doing. I think Tony Seagrave driving that team on, and he is like, I chatted to him the other day and he was saying, they used to race Rachel Afferton out the back of a van, and now they've got probably the biggest setup in the pits. But not only that, they did it the proper way and that they built it themselves. Because from his view, it would have been easier to go out and buy a trailer, but it wasn't how that team's been built, and so they had to do it this way. And the thing's unbelievable when you're in the back of it. They're great to work. We're very, very lucky, and I think I get to hear it a lot from people who have worked for WBD in different sports and are maybe on this production from something else. But in terms of the athlete access we get, the time with the teams, and you see it as well if you're at a World Cup, like fans in the pits can actually just stand outside the Specialised pit and watch Lloyd Bruni setting his bike up, which in other sports, road cycling, there's a team bus, they come off the bus, they ride off, they come back to the bus again, they get on the bus. You don't really get to see as much. So I think that's in a lot of mountain bikers, maybe without them realising.
You just sort of mentioned about chatting to the WBD guys who deal with other sports and stuff like that. How is the sort of the sport of mountain biking perceived by those guys that are sort of from outside of it? What's the general vibe with those lot?
I think it's nearly universally treated with like great sort of, first of all, surprise and then enthusiasm. People get into it really, really quickly, because I've said this a lot over the last 3 years, but especially with downhill and actually cross country, to be fair, I genuinely believe that to get the sport, you need to go and stand beside it and just watch it. And I remember I used to watch a lot of MotoGP, and then I went to the British Grand Prix one year. And when you're stood beside that sport, it's insane. Like, the dude's like hanging off a motorbike, he's almost underneath it, doing 140 mile an hour, and you're like, I think increasingly in our modern world, we get to see a lot less of that for a lot of good reasons, probably. But whenever you see somebody do something absolutely ludicrous on a mountain bike, I think it does kind of, your brain goes, oh, that's a really visceral thing that grabs you. And when you couple that with what I've just said about athletes that are accessible, happy to talk, easy to work with, especially you hear it a lot with people who have worked in rugby and football, where they don't have that access, and there's many layers of people to get through to get to a player. They react really, really well to it, and there's a load of passion and enthusiasm starts like coming from that. Then you find yourself at dinner tables where people who 3 or 4 months ago hadn't been to a mountain bike race are talking about mountain bikers, talking about racing and what they're looking forward to and what they're predicting in the next race. So it's been really, really positive, and we've seen really, really good responses to it in the company. It's a funny sport though, isn't it? Because it's always kind of been you and your mates' weird little sport.
Yeah.
And then whenever you get other people who don't know it and start looking into it, they go, oh yeah, actually. I mean, as I say, like that downhill final in Pal Aran Sal, you could never have heard of downhill racing, and I would contest that the last 10 riders on that hill you could have sat down and enjoyed. And I think that shows how good a position the sport's in.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. I think that's wicked. I suppose we should probably ask so since you've been doing the lead commentary, what's been your favourite race to look back on, to kind of cover off?
Favourite race? It's hard not to say the Olympics.
Really?
Getting to do that, felt like a big thing.
Quite surreal, I suppose. Quite a strange sort of...
And and it's really odd because it was on my calendar all year. You know, it's the Olympics are coming up. You're like, right, cool, yeah, sound. And you get to it and you go, I'm going to commentate on the Olympics. Me, like a daft lad from County Down is going to talk about something that will remain in sport like forever, really. And I'm not naturally somebody who's, I think people go very, I don't know, gooey-eyed over the Olympics and the sort of romance and the sell of it. And I'm, as you know, Rob, slightly more anchored in, I don't know, pessimism, but it did have a bit of a thing. I did have a bit of a thing about it, and then, as I say, we commentated remotely from London, which happens. Yeah, that was something I didn't know 3 years ago. Remote commentary is kind of industry standard. There's not a lot of commentators at events. It's all it's a lot more. It's a lot more straightforward to do it from a centralised point. And woke up in the morning, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, had a coffee, had my breakfast. Like, I'm going to commentate on the Olympics. And then you walk in the door and it's like, there's been 10 days of Olympic commentary happening there. And they're like, yep, signed, in that box, 20 minutes. And you're like, okay. and then...
That's terrifying.
And then, like, at the end of it, yeah, like the producer who was in the PCR came down and sat down with Ollie and I and went, okay, let's talk about what went well first. And we were like, oh. And then she gave us this quite glowing report, and the two of us were sitting there going, yeah, what did we say? What was wrong? And she was like, what do you mean? Well, you started the conversation with, let's talk about the positives first, which kind of implies there's going to be a negative. And she was like, oh no, it was all fine. And then got up and left, and the two of us were just like, and it was really, really nice. I think I'll look back on that. I think getting to meet Ken Roxon the other day, that was pretty cool.
Oof, you sent me a photo. That's fantastic.
I sent you a photo with Ken Roxon, and do you know what was really cool about that is that he was such a fan.
Of
like
me?
He was so
that's really cool.
Of you, yeah.
Yeah,
mainly of you, yeah. He was just really, really into it. And then I saw on another podcast somebody moaning about how, he stayed a bit long in the commentary, and I was like, he's Ken Roxon. Like, what would you like me to do with Ken Roxon? And he had this big watch on, and like he was just, for a long time he wouldn't say stuff because he would just be watching it and listening to us. And then at the end he got up to go, and like, I was talking about the podiums or something, and he like tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around and he sort of mouthed at me, can I take a bottle of water? And we had like a sort of an open pack of bottles of water, and I was there going, yeah, you can, yeah. And he was like, I was like, you're Ken Roxon, like, I'd give you my passport if you asked me for it. Like, so that was really cool. That'll stand out. But yeah, I'd say for the time being, probably Olympics. In terms of downhill, Ludenviel last year was really good. But I think probably actually, I mean, you kind of remember the things that are closer to you, but La Tuile this year, and it felt like the three of us had a good time, and we enjoyed it, and I think that was, and then like Palar and Sal, the stare over to the hot seat, the Jackson thing, like, yeah, I'm just a massive fan. They're all good for me. I really enjoy them all, but yeah, Olympics probably stand out.
Nice. We should probably just briefly talk about your time at MBUK.
Please.
Any time that really stands out for you? Was there any cool trips or silly features or?
Oh, there was so much. I was there for, if people are listening to this and they maybe didn't read bike magazines, how long ago was this now? This is, what, 15 years ago? 15, 17 years ago? When did you start? Because you started like...
Well, I was
started a year after me.
I was freelance for before that, though, wasn't I? And then I was in the office at the end of 2009, I think. So
I think I started 15. There end of 2007. So we were there for this sort of Top Gear. The TV show Top Gear was in its like heyday. And remember you and I used to be constantly in editorial meetings with people saying things like, why can't we just make it like Top Gear? And you're like, they've got 1 million an episode and we've got a van. The weirdest one, and I still remember how weird it was we raced dogs. Do you remember that? Were you on that one?
Oh, yeah, no, I wasn't on that one. I do remember it though, but no, I wasn't on
Ollie Beck was on that, and I've not, Ollie, if you're listening, we're going to have a beer and we're going to talk about this in Leger. I forgot he was on that. And this guy turned up in a Sprinter van with like 16 Huskies in the back of it, and the whole van was shaking and stuff. And then, yeah, it was, I don't know, it was a really interesting time to be in publishing. I think probably the best trip, it was weird, it's still on YouTube. I watched some GoPro clips of us at the Mega Avalanche. That was that was a really cool trip.
That was funny, but largely because of James Blackwell.
Yeah, and me and you told him that he'd hit that guy and he'd had to have his legs cut off him on the mountain because he ran his legs so far. And then I think as well, I remember my last trip was to go and see the first full carbon V10, to go and ride it. By that stage we knew I was leaving, and I had like 2 months to work or something, and I went over to your desk and you said, do you want to go on the launch of the new carbon fiber Santa Cruz V10? And I went, yeah. And then instantly went back into self-deprecation and was like, I don't know if I'm a good enough rider to go on that launch. And then you hardly even looked up from your computer screen and you just went, it's a 10 grand downhill bike, don't worry about it, it'll be pretty good. And I went, and I wrote a feature about if Joe Punter was given a World Cup mechanic tips from other World Cup pros, would that make them a better rider? And it was in Tuscany, and the first morning Cedric Gracia got on a ride on lawnmower and cut a massive cock and balls into the lawn outside this like place we were staying, and then it kind of disintegrated from there. And then it turned out that what they'd actually done was they'd sold this package. The idea was that they would get Santa Cruz Syndicate superfans to come on this riding holiday for a week with a syndicate, but only one guy had actually bought it. So they were like, right, well, everything's booked, we've only got one dude coming, we need to turn it into something. And they'd hurried the bike up and they turned it into the bike launch. So there was just a load of dirtbag journos, all the new V10s, the syndicate, and this one guy who was like a sort of holidaymaker come hostage on this just like rampage of like. I remember doing the first run down this track and being like, right, it didn't feel awful. There wasn't anything on it I couldn't do. I will be able to actually try and go faster next round up. I looked over and Steve Pete just had like a glass of Prosecco that this like barman was just stood at the bottom with like glasses of Prosecco at the bottom of the run and stuff. And I was like, this is not going to end well. And it didn't. But yeah, I don't know. I definitely think that what I love now is I've got really, I feel like the last year I've got really back into riding a lot more, and maybe that's been a bit of a coping thing for all the sort of, I don't know, the stuff like the online stuff. But I've kind of really reminded myself in the last year how much I do love riding my bike and how much I'm into it. And I think back to MBUK and just being able to ride a different bike every day and actually work out what felt good, what doesn't feel good, how to set things up and how to work on bikes and be around bikes. I think I've refound a bit of that again, nice. Which is really, really cool. Yeah. How's your Druid?
Lovely, but more on that soon. See what I did there?
Okay.
Yes. I was going to say, at least you didn't have to do the feature where raced skiers. Had to race skiers. That was...
Where was that? Was that somewhere up north? That was somewhere in Scotland.
No, that was in Teen. That was in Teen. Yeah. Raced.
Why did we do so much of that? Was it just a Top Gear thing? Because I remember doing... I raced dogs. I did a lot of stuff. I remember because I was into like motorsports, so I did stuff with different like motorbike riders, and I went to the Isle of Man for TT Press Week, which again turns out to be a massive piss up. Who would have thunk it? With Steve Pete, because Connor Cummins, TT racer, used to race cross country. If I could find an angle of doing anything weird that involved mountain biking somehow, I tended to go for it. But no, it was really, really good. I really I loved working at MBUK. It was brilliant.
We had a lot,
and I think it still is. I think you boys do an amazing job with the mag. I got a copy of it in the airport the other day, and I was like, "This is still as good as it's been. This is still like really, really good." You need more. You race dogs more, obviously.
Well, that and skiers. Honestly, I did that when I was a freelancer. So Tim just called me up and said, "Do you want to go and race some skiers?" I was like, "Yeah, okay." And then I had to drive to Teen with some Saracen hardtails and a couple of the guys from the Mad team. Do you remember the Mad team?
Yeah, I remember the Mad team.
Yeah, me and the lads down there racing some like Canadian skiers. We're on bikes on snow. It's not going to go well, and it didn't.
No, and it didn't. Is that the theme?
Yeah.
I did a Rocky Mountain launch. I forget, it was in like Madeira or Malaga or somewhere. And that was a similar thing. It just like it just went off the rails really, really quickly. I dislocated and broke that finger on that launch, and that's why it doesn't sit anywhere near at the that's as straight as it goes because of that launch. One of the guys, I'm not even going to go into there. But I also feel like I don't know what it's like now because I'm not there anymore. But I also feel like there was a lot of product, like there was a lot of stuff being launched every month that we used to go and cover or find out a way to build a feature in. And I don't know, is it still like that? Is there as much stuff physically being released to the press and sort of like?
Probably not quite the volume from back then, and the trips are definitely way shorter, more efficient.
Yeah,
that's the general sort of takeaway now, is like it's all about maximizing your coverage for the shortest amount of time you could spend out the office. It's a bit punchier and quicker turnaround. We don't have the luxury of just working on the print mag, so those sort of monthly deadlines now become a weekly or daily deadline.
I'm trying to get Carlson into the idea of, he does those cross country course previews where he he rides a lap on a different team bike each year, or each round, sorry. And I'm trying to get, we're trying to do this thing where we make that a bit of his impressions of those bikes and get a bit of sort of because I always have a sit on them and a roll around on them, and they're always massively different. And I always find getting informed people's takes on a product is very, very interesting. That Rock Rider, I got on it the other day expecting it to, I don't know what I expected off it. I've never been on a Rock Rider before, but I got on it and I instantly went, oh, this feels really, really good. This feels really, really fast and really capable, just from 20 foot of sort of rolling along on it. And I think that sort of, in cars they call it a butt dyno, don't they? But I think that comes from those MBUK days of riding lots of bikes and instantly getting on one and going, oh yeah, this feels pouch. Modern cross-country bikes are amazing, by the way. They are
so good.
Proper things.
Yeah, they are so good. I was going to ask you, what bikes are you riding at the moment? Obviously, you have a Druid, hence the question, right? You've got...
I have a Druid that was a difficult birth. I ordered one from Germany, completely forgetting about the situation with taxes and import duties, and then had to pay a load of tax on it, and then they sent me the wrong size, and then Forbidden very kindly helped me out, and I've finally got it built. I've got a build kit with Fox and Shimano, and I've just got a SRAM flight attendant, quite posh build kit as well. And I'm loving it. I'm loving having a bike and having. I was on through Enduro World Series, and then just through knowing them, I was on Santa Cruz's a lot for about 10 years, which were absolutely fantastic. But I'm really enjoying going down a sort of segment of travel, but also trying a high pivot bike, trying stuff that I haven't tried before. And it's a great wee bike. I've got a V10 dyno bike. I've
just got one careful owner before you, wouldn't it?
Just one careful owner. Let's not give the game away on that. Version 7.
Nice.
So the 29, old 29.
Okay.
This may be an old man thing, but I massively prefer full 29 than mullet. I
think that's a tall person thing.
That could be my legs start in my armpits, so I don't really get hit by the back wheel a lot, and I like that feeling of. I like that feeling of both wheels having the same contact point. I've tried a few mullets, and I sort of get a bit pernickety over them. I don't really. Other than that, I've got a Canyon road bike, which I love. It's an Ultimate CF, which I think is about as posh as somebody of my capabilities should get with a road bike. And I have got a S&M BMX that I've had. I think it's I've worked out the other day. I think it's the longest bike. It's the longest I've ever owned a bike. I've had it for 15 years, maybe.
Wow.
Well.
But they've just opened a Velo Solutions pump track in the village, so I'm busy finishing off whatever cartilage is left between my knees and my wrists and my ankles on the S&M most days, but loving it. I've gone through a very dangerous thing over the last few days for an older sort of project, maybe like a Sunday or something.
So this is Tom's, one of Tom's best questions he likes to ask, but it's, of all the bikes you've ridden, and you've ridden a lot, which one bike would you keep if you could keep any?
But this is tricky, isn't it? Because so what I've got to still do I have to ride it for everything?
You can have one of the bikes that you've got. You can have one of the bikes that you've got now, get rid of the rest, and then pick one bike from the last 15, 20 years of being in the industry. And those are your two bikes.
Yeah.
I am absolutely loving that little druid. I've really sort of, it took me a little bit to get my head around. I'm just sort of running a bit more sag to get it going, and like it's one of those bikes that, like, you know, like you get excited. I'm not going to say you get you put your riding kit on and get into bed the night before you go and ride it, but like if I know I'm going riding on a Saturday morning, I'll go to bed excited to go and ride on Friday night. Do you know what I mean? It's just a lovely little bike, and I'll do that really tragic thing where I wheel it out and have my coffee and have a wee look at it whilst I'm getting ready. I love, and I've had a couple of them, my last one got nicked, I love the current generation of Santa Cruz Tallboy, which I think is maybe the perfect, if you had one bike to do everything, do you know what I mean? To just like, all right, you're not going to go to the Alps or do an uplift day and be as fast as you would be on an enduro bike or a downhill bike. But in terms of if you rode every day, I think a Tallboy's pretty bob on.
What about from like a nostalgic point of view? Which of the bikes?
Sunday. Iron Horse
Just
Sunday.
that easy? Yeah. Not the M1?
I think I look back on, I had a Sunday for MBUK as a long-term bike, and I'm not I am by no means a great bike rider, but I've ridden a lot for a long time. But I think I learned how to properly go around corners on that bike, and it's just got that. I just have nothing but positive associations with it. I rode one when I was freelance. I did a feature where I bought one for 500 quid, and I sort of serviced everything on it and put new tyres on it and went out to see how crap it would be, and it was actually still brilliant. It was just still too small for me. I've never tried the bigger one. I only ever tried the medium one, so I have a bit of unfinished business with that. Although the bigger one looks a bit awkward, it doesn't look as Sunday like. If I could have one bike just to have, it would be a Honda RN1. Because that was an interesting topic of conversation that one of the guys that we had with us asked, how much is that bike worth? And we, like, Minar and I kind of fell into this, probably to the guy who asked the question originally, very boring conversation about it's how much is a Formula One car worth? You can't do anything with it. Like, it's kind of just an object, ostensibly. No parts from it will go on to anything else. It's a bespoke thing, but it's still a Formula One car. And that bike, Minar reckons, in its day was valued at 80 grand, and that was based on the cumulative time and effort of all the people involved in the project, like their hours and then the actual material added up to 80 grand. So now, nearly 2 decades later, that must be worth. But I would still, if I was Bezos, I'd probably have that in my office and just lose a lot of time to looking at it. It's a lovely thing. It's a lovely thing to be around and to just look at and sort of see all the little details on it. I need to stop looking at Iron Horse Sundays on eBay, because I have that thing. I do with bikes what I do with cars, in that I put this little hurry up on myself where I go, if you want one of these, if you're serious about wanting one of these, you need to get on board before they get too expensive and you can't own them. And I think some days I saw Connor
Fearon raced
Connor Fearon was racing one, and I saw someone else has dusted one off lately, and I loved, you'll remember this, in Dirt there was a picture of Duncan Riffle's one, the white one, with the Honda logo.
It was Iron Horse Honda, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it had a skinny, I think it had an air shock in the back of it.
Was it Sven Martin's team? Something like that.
May have been, yeah. I'd like to build and I had in my head last night, I was sitting on the sofa going, a replica of one of those would be pretty cool. And then you go, but what are you going to do with it? You're not, like, are you going to ride that over a 2-year-old V10? Like,
still.
Don't know, what would you have? What's your one bike from back in the day that you'd still have?
If I could get any.
Was it that Honda Giant that used to bang your knees around?
No, it's not that. No, it would have been, if I could get any, and not necessarily ones I've owned, I would take a Sun Radical Plus for sure.
Oh,
just because of the whole, kind of back to the whole theatre and everything, the mysticism and everything behind all of that. For me, that was part of the racing back then. And obviously it was harder to watch then. But when you saw pictures of Nico and Caro, all of those guys, and they just dominated everything, and they had these bikes that weren't just run-of-the-mill. You couldn't go out and buy the suspension. You could eventually go buy the frames and stuff, but nothing that they were racing was just off the shelf. It was so cool and so ahead of its time that it was just like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Do you two have an opinion?
Oh, I was just going to say, Brendan's custom orange, or the one that Steve had, the old 222 that was slammed, that was super low, super slack. And when he had it, they had them in black. Those things looked fast.
Yeah, that was a good looking bike.
Here's
loud. One for you two though. Do you think that in downhill, do you think that it matters if they are racing what you can buy in the shop?
I like that they do, like, the all round, like you're saying, like those kids racing that stock bike. I think it's a cool story, and I think for a brand, it's an incredible story. For Commentating to go and say, this is the bike that you can actually go and buy. And I think mountain bike's one of those sort of unique-ish performance sports where you literally can go and, to most extent, buy what you see at the weekend. You can't do that with a lot, like with any motorsport. So, you can't go and buy a world superbike, really. Certainly not for any sort of money that people can put on a credit card or whatever it might be. At the same time, the stuff that Specialized are doing with with their race bikes and stuff, like if you want to see downhill as like the horrible cliche of like the F1 of mountain bike or the F1 of cycling, like it's cool to see those bikes being pushed and the tech that's going in there, the lights on the stems and the buttons under the bars and the the crazy machining and the linkages that you can't really quite tell what's going on. Like, it's cool. It builds intrigue, it builds a story, and it builds like that hype and excitement around it that, so I'm sort of split on that.
But something you just mentioned, the Sun Radical is that, isn't it? The Sun Radical is, like, they must have sold, all of like 7 of those, like, in reality production bikes?
Probably. I mean, I think, so I actually wrote an article about this just a few months ago, and my take was, I think it's great that you can buy those bikes. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. And I think by having that, there's that rule, the UCI rule, whereby if you're racing on something, in theory, it should be available 12 months after it's been used, unless there's some kind of, you can basically kind of have a get out clause somehow where you get exempt for another year and you have to just keep applying for that, like I guess the Specialized guys have done. But I think if you were to ditch that and open it up again to brands like Honda or, McLaren made an e-bike, maybe they'd want to make a downhill bike, kind of venture into something slightly different. It's a good way to kind of showcase stuff. And if it's on the mainstream TV, what a great way to kind of push your brand in a different direction.
Yeah.
Or,
I think as well, I think people as well, I'm sure you find this, routinely overestimate how many downhill bikes are sold in the world.
Right. Yeah.
It's very much, it's a pinnacle product, but it's such a specific use thing that...
Well, you're selling the brand, aren't you? You're not selling the bike, you're selling the brand.
We speak to distributors, and they say, how many bikes have you sold with a downhill bike? It would be single figures in a year, or maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 at a push. But there aren't many people buying downhill bikes in the UK. And when you think that a lot of big brands have a downhill bike, Trek Spec, Commentating, all these sort of brands, they have one. Like, how many are realistically going to sell? If I was going to start bringing a new brand to the UK as a distributor, would I buy 10 of them in a year? Don't know. You'd have to push hard to sell them, maybe.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? But yet they're so like think Commensal and you think
So
of
visible.
Miriam Nicole or Amory Pierron, like full flight in behind the stem, and that is the bike they're on.
Yeah. I imagine if Spesh brought out that downhill bike now and they said, right, off your chop, you can go and buy that, like, you'd see so many of them around.
And I mean, in terms of a marketing exercise,
Gold.
right, even if they didn't sell that many, it's going to just push people in that direction, isn't it? So it's a...
Well, that's what, like, it's kind of to kind of like, yeah, it's one of the things that kept coming back when we were filming race bikes was you look at all the little things on like Petey's Canberra bike and the centre section of each of the original high roller tyre, that they're cut down by a couple of mil, and you go, like, he won that race by 0.05 of a second. Do you know what I mean? That it's like all of that effort is poured into. Now that V10 is not a stock V10, but a Santa Cruz V10 won that race. A Santa Cruz won that race. It's a funny sport like that. I've had a lot of conversations with people. I know, like, that was one of the big things on Trek for a couple of seasons recently, was that you had to run what they could sell. That was their approach. And at the same time, you were looking across the pit, and Specialized were going wild with data acquisition and, like, secret brakes and all this stuff. And you go, which of these is actually commercially the cleverer way of doing it? They probably both work out. Let's face it, they probably both stack up. There's people smarter than us in those boardrooms going, let's do this. But it's a really interesting sport in that way. It's sort of like what is... I mean, and then you've got Taddy on a bike that can do enduro, apparently.
Downhill, down tube storage in there.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, what, 3 years ago? That would have been... people wouldn't have believed you. That would be a thing that an enduro bike could do.
And you can bolt weights to it.
But now it
comes with weights.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I can't understand why nobody's done a neater solution than, like, this is the first bike. Is this the first bike that you could actually? There's a way you can bolt weights to it.
You can.
Whenever you're seeing like some of the biggest teams in the world, like gaffer taping roofing lead to the bottom of a down tube, you're like, there's got to be a better way than this. For an industry obsessed with standards and sizing and widths and measures and detail.
Just get Chad Aldridge and his 3D printer.
Exactly.
He's big into that.
Or if you want to make it look really
3D
tidy,
printing.
get him to wear a backpack with it in.
Yeah.
Brilliant. What could go wrong?
Little camel back.
They could change it per lap.
Yeah, exactly. Or if it's all going wrong, go and weigh it in. Bit of cash in the back pocket for the party on Sunday night.
Yeah,
everyone's
easy.
a winner. Yeah, and you haven't had to put any tape on your bike.
I mean, I'm not against tape on the bike, but the world's fastest people pissing about with roofing lead feels like it's gone the wrong way.
It's a bit homebrew, isn't it?
But then that's racing, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing that I talked about. The Honda was such a finished product. There's stuff that you see whenever you're on these things that you go, that's how you're doing that. It works. Why would I do it any other way? Like, there's lots of cool stuff knocking about that is just racing is necessity, isn't it? We need to do this. What's the easiest way of doing it?
Right. I think on that bombshell, we should probably wrap things up.
Thank you very much. This has been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Talking to, well, not here, on there here. But it's been absolutely lovely to see your wonderful face, to chat again, to catch up, to reminisce, to talk about everything you're up to now.
We should do a future one of just the MBUK years, and
Let's do it.
I don't know, get a few central characters overlap, and get Collins Boy in, get Jimmer on.
Is Jimmer
get the band
on?
back together? No.
I think.
Why is he not aging? Why does he look the same age?
He is the Peter Pan. In fact, no, he's not. I'm not going to say he's the Peter Pan of mountain biking. He is Peter Pan. It's as simple as that. He hasn't
Peter
aged
Pan
a
with
bit.
questionable life choices.
Well, he's... Yeah, you just wonder how he survived so long, knowing him, having been on nights out.
Given
with
what
him.
he's been up to. Yeah. And every time I see him, I'm like, what is he doing differently than I am? I've got a face like a bag of smashed crabs, and he's like refusing to age.
It's quite incredible. Yeah, maybe Max has said it's surfing. Maybe it is. Maybe we've done it all wrong.
No, you and I have talked about surfing before, Rob. Surfing is cold and wet.
Sharks. One word.
The
Sharks.
sea is a cruel mistress.
We do not belong there. I'd rather be on the moon.
In a wetsuit.
It's a really, really cheap spacesuit, okay? A wetsuit wrapped in foil.
Your insides would stay inside it
Well,
once the vacuum had got you.
okay, on that note, maybe we do
Yeah,
need
we
to
gotta
finish
stop
things
now.
off. So thank you again,
Okay.
Rick. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Tom. Please join us for another MBUK podcast soon.